I tried You Need a Budget for a year, and here's what happened. So before I talk to you about what You Need a Budget is or why you should use it, I'm first going to talk you through how I wound up using You Need a Budget myself. Something that I know that you hear, or I know, like if you're watching this video, I'm sure you've heard it, but everyone says you need a budget, or budgeting is very important in personal finances. And of course, why wouldn't I agree? I feel like budgeting is great, but how do I budget? So I tried apps because I'm a 21-year-old at the time, so I tried Mint, Empower, Rocket Money, Every Dollar, Excel sheets, all these different apps that I thought would help me get a better grasp of my finances, and I never really stuck with them. Whether it was willpower or just they didn't really make sense for me. At the time, I was a college student. My income and life events were extremely variable, so I would have to do like workarounds to make these apps work. For example, in a lot of apps, you have to put in a monthly income. Because I only worked for a part of the year, or while I was in school, I didn't make as much. I would have to calculate my annual income divided by 12 and then use that. As you would imagine, that didn't really work well. So that's how I eventually ended up on You Need a Budget, just by process of eliminations, trying all these different apps and like, hey, this doesn't work. And at the time I was a college student and they offer 1 year free to college students. So I was like, hey, I'll give this a try. You know, people speak highly of it on Reddit. I watched a couple YouTube videos on it. Why not? So what is You Need a Budget, or what is envelope-based budgeting? So envelope-based budgeting is a budgeting paradigm where you have a list of envelopes and you name them. So you have like your mortgage, rent, food, gas, car payment, and at the beginning of each month, you take your paycheck and put that money in those envelopes. You then use those envelopes for that purpose. So once you pay your mortgage, you take the money out of that envelope, and once you're out of money in that envelope, you don't spend any more money for that category. That made sense to me more than any of the other budgeting paradigms. Like, it's simple. I have X amount of money to spend. Once I spend it, it's done. On top of that, You Need a Budget is linked to your account. So when transactions pop up, you can then put those transactions in a given envelope. So they have 4 principles. They have give every dollar a job, plan for your true expenses, roll with the punches, and age your money. So give every dollar a job is pretty self-explanatory, but for those who don't know, it's once you get paid, you're putting that money in an envelope, and that envelope is that dollar's job. Plan for your true expenses. This is kind of where I struggled in past apps. I wanted to be a little bit more optimistic than I probably should have in my spending money categories, but planning for your true expenses is embracing it and figuring out how you could work around it. I think this is what helped me understand that budgeting isn't restrictive. It's not penny pinching. It's you choosing where your money goes at the beginning of the month, not making that decision a million times during the month. Like your friends ask you to go out, you have to recalculate that in your mind. Next, we have roll with the punches. One thing that stopped me with a lot of budgeting apps is that at the time, my income in life was extremely variable. I was a college student. I wasn't making that much, and the money that I was making was on and off. So in times where I wasn't making money, I didn't like that these budgeting apps were telling me, hey, you're spending too much because you don't have any money. And the last one, which I think is the most interesting, is age your money. I didn't know what it meant at first. When you get paid, and when you spend that same money that you got paid, that's the time in between you make and you spending that money is the age of your money. And you want to increase that time, because when you increase that time, it gives you more time to make decisions. So let's say that you have the age of your money is 2 days. That means that you get paid on the 1st, and 2 days later, that same money is spent. So how was my year on You Need a Budget? So to start, I was uncomfortable with guesstimating how much I spent to start off. So in order to start on You Need a Budget, you have to make a budget and assign money to these, or targets to these categories. And that made me uncomfortable. 2, credit cards confused me a lot. I'm not gonna lie. There's still some things that I don't understand about them to this day. I watched multiple YouTube videos, multiple Reddit threads. They are functional for me, but do I understand how they work? Semi. And lastly, but mostly, definitely not least, the whole idea of budgeting, I was kind of uncomfortable with, you know? I shot a couple of shots at different apps. They didn't work out, and I came in with that mentality like, you know, if this doesn't work out, I'll just go back to what I did before. I know that I make more than I spend, invested and saved some, I'm good. But A saying that has helped me is that a budget is like a map. It's not necessary, but it does help, you know? It lets you be intentional with your money. So like with a map, you pick where you're going and then go there. So you don't just end up somewhere. You end up where you actually decide to go, which I think is a really big pro of the app. I started getting comfortable, but there would be times where, like I said, I wouldn't check the app because I made a purchase that I was uncomfortable with, and I was like, this is going to destroy my app. I'm just going to wait till I get paid so I can make my app happy again. I don't like seeing red categories or overspent. But I kept sticking through it, and eventually it got to a point where it kind of felt like a game. Like each night or each day, or even when I was bored, like instead of checking Reddit or Instagram or whatever social media platform you use, you go on You Need a Budget and move transactions to categories. What really helped me was that the decision is already done. You Need a Budget isn't like, it's not the decision. So like if I made a big purchase, the money's already out of my account. You Need a Budget is just the plan. So going on the app, moving transactions to that envelope, you now see what you have to do to make that month make sense. So you have to balance out that month. And if you don't balance out that month, then you go under. And then the pros and cons. So some of the biggest pros of You Need a Budget is that they have You Need a Budget together. So as you guys can see, I'm married. Me and my wife use You Need a Budget, and it pays for itself in gold. Before we married, with shared expenses, we would just cash out each other. That was what made the most sense in my mind. But as we were dating and we had a lot more shared expenses, we then got a shared bank account where we could just each put a fixed amount in, and that would be the card that we use for things that we do together. But eventually, you know, as you get married, we combined our finances, and now we use You Need a Budget together, and it completely changes the conversation around money. So traditionally, the way that it would work would be like, hey, I'm going to be making this purchase for X, Y, and Z. And you don't really have to do that with You Need a Budget. So we each have our own spending money categories. Then we have categories for the house, the mortgage, maintenance, home improvements. So whenever my wife or I want to make a purchase, we don't really have to check in with the other person as long as it follows the plan that we outlined, which I think is amazing. Another big pro is that it has reflection features, so you can see how much you spent more at a micro level. So before You Need a Budget, I was just worried about inflows and outflows, but now I could go back and see how much I spent on my spending money a year ago and how that changes over time. Another pro/con is that they have a net worth feature, which I think is cool. And as you can see, like when you start using the app, it usually goes in the upward direction. Some of the cons that I don't necessarily like is that it's a budgeting app, but it has the ability to link your account. Linking your investment accounts is kind of glitchy. It doesn't work out as well as I would want it to. So I feel like the net worth feature kind of doesn't really work in that sense. Credit cards are very confusing. And then lastly, the biggest con for me, or at least when I started initially, was why am I paying for a budgeting app? There are multiple free apps available, and the point of a budgeting app is to save money, so why am I spending money on this? But for the pros, I would say that it pays for itself. So if you're a student, I would definitely at least take the 1-year trial, but I think it's definitely worth it. For at least 1 month, I would heavily recommend trying this and seeing how it changes the way you think about money. Because I think that's something that isn't talked about enough, is that budgeting isn't about restricting yourself or being cheap. It's about making a plan for you and your partner or your family and sticking to it. So you're determining where you're going to end up. You're not spending and then figuring out what's left over. You're actually deciding that I'm going to save or invest this much. I'm going to use this much for vacationing. I'm going to spend this much on seeing my family because those are the values that make sense to me. And that's why I heavily recommend You Need a Budget. And that was my experience with You Need a Budget. So thank you for watching.